Words with 3 syllables. The second syllable is stressed if the word ends with these suffixes as shown on the screen. Some examples would be confusion, consumption, denial, and metallic. A 4-syllable word. The second syllable is stressed. The words end with these suffixes. Some examples would be philosophy, psychology, community, and historical. And sometimes the word is also stressed at the second syllable with a compound adjective, such as well played, old fashioned, and that's about it. Next, we can move on to my friend Tuấn taught the conditional.
Okay, thanks you, Chi, for your presentation on the pronunciation part. So I shall continue with my section of our group. Today we're gonna learn about the conditionals. So the conditional consists of two parts. The first part is the if clause, or the antecedent, and the second part is the main clause, or the consequent. And there are four main kinds of the conditionals. The real conditional, the first conditional, the second conditional, and the third conditional. So let's begin with the real conditional. So you have already been familiar with the zero conditional, which is used to refer to universal facts or things that are true. In reality, it belongs to a much larger group, which is called the real conditional, and it is used to refer to habits, things that are true, generally happen, or have happened, or very likely to happen. Tenses of the real conditional are varied and not fixed into only one kind. For example, people die if they are killed. That's a fact. If she felt like crying, she always went to the river bank. So every time she felt like crying in the past, she always went to the river bank. It is true in the past. And in the real conditional, modal verbs can be used in the main clause, the consequent. For example, if we wanted someone to fix something, we would ask our neighbor. So what here is like to show habit, the consistencies of our action. Like in the past, if we wanted someone to fix something, we always ask our neighbor. Let's move on to the first conditional. The first conditional is used to refer to the result of an imagined situation, while implying that the antecedent is quite probable. The structure is if plus present simple plus future simple, or modal verbs with future meanings. And I want to ask you, what are the modal verbs with future meaning? Can you suggest some examples? Among the modal verbs with future meaning that you can think of, may, might, can, shall, and should are the most commonly seen. In the first conditional, you can use imperative sentences in the consequent to make offers, give instructions, and advice. For example, if you can't stand horror movies, just turn it off. And instead of if plus simple present, we can have if plus present continuous to indicate a present action or a future arrangement. For example, if you are looking for the teacher, you will see her in the staff room. This is implies that the action looking for the teacher is happening at the same time as when the sentence is spoken. And we can use if plus present perfect to focus on the future consequence of the past event. For example, if you have finished eating, you may start doing your homework. The finished eating is an completed action, while the doing the homework hasn't started yet. So this is to focus on the doing your homework part if the condition finished eating has already completed. Next up, we have the second conditional. The second conditional is used to talk about things that will probably not happen, untrue or imaginary situations. The, the structure is if plus past simple plus conditional simple or plus would verb 0 verb there. The conditional type 2 is used firstly when the supposition is contrary to non-facts. For example, if I live near my school, traveling wouldn't take so much time, so it is not true. Secondly, when we don't expect the action in antecedent to occur. For example, if I ever dyed my hair, my mother would be so angry. Thirdly, we use it in advice form, or if I were you. For example, if I were you, I would hand the money in to the police. And lastly, it is used to make polite suggestions. For example, it would be nice if you help me do the washing up. So keep in mind that suggestions in type 1 are also polite, but they are less polite than in the type 2. Then instead of if plus past simple, we can have if plus past continuous. For example, if we were traveling by car in lieu of train, I would feel less sick. Would can be replaced by could or might. For example, if you attend the class frequently, you could solve this problem with flying colors, or you would be able to solve this problem with flying colors. Let's move on. If plus s plus was were to can be used also to firstly to talk about unreal or imaginary future events. For example, if the teacher were to come in, or if the teacher came in, we could pretend to study diligently and out of our own accord. And secondly, this is to make a suggestion, already polite, even less direct. For example, if you were to close the window, we would not be cold anymore. Next, we move to the third conditional. The third conditional is used to refer to a different or unreal past that thus has imaginary results. It can also be used to show regret of the speaker. The structure is if plus past perfect plus perfect conditional, or would have plus past participle. In the third conditional, would may be replaced by could or might. For example, if you had put more thought into your novel, it could have won the best fictional work, or it could have been able to win the best fictional work. And instead of if plus past perfect, we can have if plus past perfect continuous to emphasize the duration of the action. For example, if they hadn't been wearing a seatbelt, would have been seriously injured. That is to emphasize the action wearing the seatbelt, like when the accident occurred, the speaker emphasized that they were wearing the seatbelt. Now we move on to the mixed conditional. There are two kinds of mixed conditional. The first one is if plus type 3 plus type 2. The second one is if plus type 2 plus type 3. Let's move on to the first one. The first one is if plus past perfect plus would, could, might plus above 0, and it is used to express that a different present result can be achieved if there was an alternative path. For example, stop complaining. If you had done your research in advance, the deadline would not be a problem now. And the first one is used more commonly than the second one. The second one is if plus past simple plus would, could, might have plus verb 3. And it is used to express a present condition, like something that has changed or does not exist in the first place, to describe why a certain past result did not occur. For example, if I had money, I would have traveled around the world in the summer break. Like if the speaker always have the money, they would have traveled around the world in the summer break. But in the reality, they didn't. They don't have the money, so they couldn't travel. And we moved on to the unless. Unless has the meaning of except if, and is used to introduce an afterthought. Unless can only be used in type 0 and type 1. And unless plus affirmative verb equal to if plus negative, or if not. For example, I won't drive you home unless you show me some gratitude. Next, we move on to the but for. But for means if it were not for, or if it had not been for. And but for plus something expresses the idea of if something did not happen or had not happened. For example, but for the pandemic, or if it were not for the pandemic, we could go on a vacation. Next, normally, will would can be used in the if clause, but they can be used only when there are specific conditions. Will can be used in the if clause to talk about the result of the main clause. For example, I will lend you my money if you will be able to get home with it. So now instead of the if clause being the condition, the if clause now is the result of the main clause. And if plus want means to show refusal to do something. For example, if they won't let us pass, or if they refuse to let us pass, we will have to take another route. And will can be used in the if clause also to show obstinate insistence, or if somebody insists on doing something. For example, if he will compete against me, or if he insists on competing against me, I will have to use my secret weapon. And will and would can both be used in the if clause to make polite requests. and in this case, would is more polite than will. For example, if you will sit down and wait, the cake will be finished in a moment. And to show willingness, if somebody or something be willing to, for example, if you will stay silent until the end of the class, or if you are willing to stay silent until the end of the class, you will be able to get back to your seat. And should can also be used in the if clause. In the first condition, to indicate that the action, though possible, is not very likely. For example, if you should have any problems, please call this number. It is less likely to happen than when you say, if you have any problems, please call this number. And happen to and should happen to can be used similarly to should, and among the three, happen to is the most commonly used. For example, if you should happen to or happen to pass a supermarket, perhaps you could pick up some eggs. Next up, we have the inverted conditional. So I want to ask you, do you know what is inverted conditional and how it is used? How do you use it? So, in formal and literary styles, if can be dropped and an auxiliary verb is put before the subject, and it is used to emphasize the condition or the if clause. You see on the screen here we have three examples belong to each of the type 1, type 2, and type 3. And in order to create the inverted conditional, we just simply remove the if and put the auxiliary verb on the front, like that. The transition and the placement is a bit off, but don't mind that too much. And instead of if, we have other words and expressions with similar uses. And it is divided into two main categories. The first category is used to talk about what might happen, and the second category is used to make conditions. The example of each category is shown on the screen right now. You can see it. And so I want to ask you a question. Can you suggest some more words and expressions? Now let us distinguish the three in even if and even though. First, even if. We can use even if to mean whether or not, which indicates that the antecedent has no impact on the consequent. For example, we will leave at 9 even if you aren't ready, or whether or not you are ready. And do you see the question mark next to the even though? Because English is rather confusing. In the Practical English Grammar 4th edition, it is suggested that even though shares the same use and meaning with even if. An Oxford Learner Dictionary also backs this argument up with its definition. However, the Cambridge Dictionary shows that even if and even though are different from one another. And if the even though has the meaning similarly to even if, it also has another meaning, despite the fact that and this meaning is not relevant to the conditional clause in this case. For example, even though she is his girlfriend, she often hangs out with a group of boys without him knowing it. And finally, we have to distinguish in case and if. First we have in case. To do A in case to do A in case B happens means to do A because B might happen. B is not a condition of A but rather the reason for A to happen. For example, I will cook something in case he feels hungry, or I will cook something whether or not he feels hungry. If he feels hungry is not a condition, but it is the reason for A to happen. Because I think he might feel hungry, I will cook something. And to do A if B happens means to do A if B has already happened. B is a condition for A to happen. If B did not happen before, then A will not happen. For example, I will cook something if he feels hungry. I will only cook after he feels hungry. And this distribution only exists in the British English. In American English, in case and if are often used with the same meaning. And that's all for my presentation on the conditional. Thanks for your listening.